Your Grace, the Prussians are here.
Well, let's see if we can find something useful for them to do. Go on, Sharp. You've beaten the old guard, lad. They won't stand. I got a sewing. A sewing.
Well, that's all I came for, so it is. Goodbye, Colonel Sharp.
Goodbye, Mr. Harper.
Are you entering forward? See them down!
Pharisee, heresy, heresy, Pharisee. Jesus was a Pharisee, and that is no heresy.
Welcome back to the Pharisee podcast. Dr. Nathaniel Klein.
This is like season 2 now, right? It's been a while.
Yeah, season 2. We let you on a cliffhanger there.
A hot minute.
Pick us up to speed where we leave off.
Well, we had our silly Hanukkah episodes,
Yes, those are awesome.
so you'll have to wait till next year for me to finish that saga. But yeah,
That'd be good.
we left off with the fall of Byzantium. I think it was the sixth
The fall
trumpet,
of-
right?
Yes, that's right, the sixth trumpet. And the sixth trumpet goes. The next thing to come is obviously the seventh trumpet, which is like a folder hyperlink to open up all of the bowls of wrath. So, you read the chapter about the seventh trumpet, and you see that it pretty much lines up with the first bowl of wrath. So I'm going to pull up my Bible here. Maybe you want to pull yours up too, and kind of.
What chapter are
Look
we in
together.
here?
Let's see. We should be in. Let me see. I think it's Revelation 12. That's Woman and Dragon. Bowls start in 16, I think. I want to get to the. Let's see. Pardon me. Yeah. So we can go to the first bowls of wrath. Start in Revelation chapter 16. Let's see. Revelation 15 kind of introduces it. And I think Revelation 12, that's the woman being persecuted. And it's been a while. Okay, so Revelation 11 is the chapter about the two witnesses. And
It's been a
at the
while
end
since we
of-
did those guys.
yeah, so the at the very end of chapter 11, the seventh trumpet is introduced, and he says, the seventh angel, this is verse 15 of Revelation 11, the seventh angel sounded his trumpet, and loud voices called out in heaven, the kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ, and he will reign forever and ever. The 24 elders sat on their thrones before God, fell on their faces and worshipped him. And then we skip what they say. In verse 19 it says, the temple in heaven was opened,
You're not going to sing
and
it?
the ark of... Huh?
It says you got to sing it. Their song.
You want me to sing it?
I'm just kidding.
You go right
It's a
ahead,
joke.
just as they do. And the ark of his covenant appeared in his temple, and there were flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, an earthquake, and a great hailstorm. And all these components, the flashes of lightnings and the rumblings, peals of thunder, earthquake, and great hailstorm, all occur in the bowls of wrath. So I think what this is essentially saying is the seventh angel sounds, and then all these things take place. This is like a kind of encapsulating verse of, okay, now revealed to John here are the bowls of wrath as soon as the seventh trumpet is sounded. So then we can, and this is right after the two witnesses. So, the two witnesses are describing when this 1,260 years of persecution that the two witnesses or the church endured under the Antichrist, under the popes. And so the bowls of wrath are the final judgments being poured about on the Antichrist and the beast kingdom. So it makes sense that after the beast kingdom and the Antichrist have been allowed to just basically persecute and trample on the saints for this period of 1,260 years, if you believe that they're years, it reads days, but we've been talking about the day for year principle, then it would make sense that at the end of that interim period of time, you start to have the situation change, where now the Antichrist is no longer in control of everything in the sense that he can dominate the people of God. Now the tide is turning, and bowls of wrath, these plagues, are going to be poured out upon the beast system. So if we follow this 1,260 years from 538 all the way to 1798, we find that the end of this period occurs basically around the French Revolution. And the French Revolution brought about this process where France overthrew Roman Catholicism and religion, like Christianity, any sort of monotheistic religion. It overthrew it and cast it out and started worshiping basically naturalism, humanism, rationalism, and these sorts of philosophies. And so that's when France actually kicked the Roman Catholic Church out of France, basically made it illegal to practice Christianity. And so for a period of 3.5 years, Christianity was essentially dead in France. And France was like the seat. It was like Broadway of the beast system, right? So France was like the political Broadway, Main Street, so to say. And France was known as the eldest daughter of the church. France is the most powerful of the 10 kingdoms that emerged out of Rome, and it was through Clovis, who was the French king, the first major European monarch to convert to Catholicism, and it was the Frankish kingdom that supported and engaged in basically all the military aspects of the Roman Catholic Church, including the Crusades and several things like that. So France was a huge player. So to see France actually eject Roman Catholicism was a huge deal. And at that time Napoleon comes on the scene. And so Napoleon then, as you know, he strips Roman Catholicism even further by exiling the Pope, crowning himself emperor, and basically dominating Europe for a period of time. And so that leads us into these bowls of wrath.
All right, so we've jumped quite a distance here from the sixth trumpet. When did the Ottoman Empire take down Constantinople?
Yeah, it was a 1453. So let me see if I can get you
It's like a good 300 years here.
Yeah. See if I can get you a chart. Find the page where we left off. Catch us up to speed on what happened in that sixth trumpet, Dr. Klein.
Well, I remember cannons. We had the big cannons, and you're making that out to be the what was it, the power in its tail, or the scorpion's tail, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
And how the Turks are described there, the men's faces with the long hair and all
Right.
that being there, and that they had the tails, or possibly like the manes that they wore on their spears or helmets.
Yep. So all these symbols in the sixth trumpet line up with everything that happened with the Ottomans the angels, the four angels being loosed from the Euphrates. So this empire, starting with the Turks, the Seljuk Turks, through four progressive kingdoms, ending with the Ottoman Empire, crushing the Byzantine Empire, the last remaining stronghold of the Roman Empire, as it were. And so I'm going to show you. Can you see this chart on my screen here?
Yes, sir.
So there we go. So this kind of gives you back to where we were with the timelines here. So all the six trumpets, the Ottoman Turks subjugate the eastern third of the empire, this being the second woe, Revelation 9, and from 1062 to 1453. So now, basically, you're right, we have about this like 300-year gap to the Bowls of Wrath beginning with the French Revolution. So a lot of things happen during this time. You know, you've got shortly after this, you have England breaking off from the Catholic Church. Well, you've got the Reformation in 1517, right? The Protestant Reformation. You've got the printing press. You've got several translations of the Bible into different vernaculars, and the printing press being able to spread those across the known world, and leading to, you know, Protestant Reformation. Then you got the Hussite Revolution, and all these battles that continue to take place between Protestantism and Roman Catholicism, with Roman Catholicism still dominating Europe, the majority of it, until finally the whole thing changes when we get to the French Revolution, because the French had had enough of monarchical systems, of kings, you know, just telling them what they could, and then the Pope telling the kings and queens what they could do, and so they completely cast it off. And, you know, I wanted to avoid going into, you know, the minutia of the details around that, because it's a lot of details in the French Revolution, but I could just touch on a couple in this chapter on the two witnesses. And
it's like it sounds like a good and bad thing. Like they're tossing out the baby with the bathwater. Like it's good that they recognize the evils of the papacy, but at the same time they're rejecting God and the Bible. But that's only because they've seen how it's been used for evil, which I feel like happens to a lot of atheists.
Yeah, absolutely. And until they discover like true, you know, real Christianity that isn't about just subjugating everyone else and forcing them into your belief system at the edge of a sword, you know. So from here's this period which I call the deposition. So the two witnesses, or the church, the ecclesia, formally testified against the apostate Roman Church for 1,260 years, and from 538 to 1797, and then you have the French dechristianization movement killed the church, both good and bad, right? Like you said, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And so the church was considered to be dead for this period of 3.5 years, roughly known as the Reign of Terror in France, which began on November 24, 1793, when the Council General of the Commune of Paris banned Christianity in all forms. 3.5 years later, June 17, 1797, the Council of 500 legally abolished all restrictions on worship, and a powerful revival of the Christian faith followed. So, yes, Catholicism was allowed to continue to practice, but they had to submit to French government. Like Catholicism today in America doesn't get to tell everybody else what to do. They have to submit to the U.S. government, right? They have to obey the U.S. government's laws. And so their ability to terrorize, their ability to trample upon the saints was stripped and removed. And yeah, at this point, it was almost as if all Christianity had died, but then it was restored. And a revival of the Christian faith occurred after this. And this is where we pick up with Napoleon. And this is where in 1798 he dragged the Pope from Rome. General Berthier dragged him from Rome, demanded that he abdicate his temporal authority over Rome and the Papal States. So Rome is in Italy, not France. So we go from France having this revolution to now it's spreading on a massive global scale because Napoleon just kicked the Pope out of his own city and told him he better abdicate his temporal authority and the Papal States. So this was a huge blow to the papacy at this point. Make sense?
Yep.
So, in all this literature here that I have written out, I go into detail on how this all happened, some parallels with Elijah and his 3.5 years and all this sort of stuff. But
I was just reading about Elijah.
What's that?
I was just reading about Elijah all weekend.
Oh, really? What'd you learn?
Well, yeah, it's interesting after he, kills all the prophets of Baal, goes to Mount Sinai, and that's when he's like, I just want to die. Like, even though he saw this miracle called fire down from heaven, like he just still wants his life to be over because he's so depressed over how Israel won't repent. But God tells him there's still believers in the northern kingdom, and it's crazy how he does the same thing as Jesus. Spends 40 days, 40 nights.
Mm-hmm.
He goes to Mount Sinai, and God tells him to go anoint the king of Aram, a king that wasn't king of Aram, which I thought was odd. He's sending him outside Israel to go anoint a foreign king. I'm like, I don't remember that story. That's got some meaning, I'm sure.
Yeah, some of these stories are a little obscure. You read it, you're like, man, I don't remember that.
It's like, yeah, it always starts with the prophets of Baal. I don't really. No
Right.
preachers want to talk about how Elijah's suicidal.
Right. Yeah. There's a cool parallel here. Luke 4:25. It says, in the time of Elijah, when the sky was shut for 3.5 years, and then the trampling of the holy city for 3.5 years is a parallel, and the woman fleeing into the wilderness for 3.5 years, or 1,260 days. Yeah, there's a lot of parallels there, and I won't get into. So rather than using
it did remind me though, reading Elijah. Now that you mention it, how we talk about Baal and it's a cult, and we think it's mainly there's just these false idols and stuff. But the Northern Kingdom probably was practicing a form of Yahwehism.
Mm-hmm.
They had their own temple. A lot of it was based off that. They had Asherah. They gave God a wife, just like they have Mary. So there's a lot of. I don't know if that's what you're going for now. I'm thinking about what did Daniel want as an answer here.
No, that's great. I wasn't thinking about that.
It reminds me of the papacy, just how that's probably how they tricked so many Israelites into practicing this, and why the Baal cult was so huge, and it's that's why Elijah is so depressed, but God's there's still 7,000, but it's that's not a lot. There's 10 tribes that were all followers of Yahweh, and got deceived by something, and it had to be it wasn't just ooh, these idols are shiny. It was probably something that was elaborate, just like with the Roman papacy. It's a false light, if you will.
Yeah, and all these Marian apparitions that people claim to have seen, and these false miracles and relics, and you also have some parallels in the what you could call the Protestant church too, with the charismatic movement, with false signs and false wonders and word of faith, and type of movements, and God has told me I'm a prophet, and God has told me this, and He wants to do this in your life, and even coming from some of these big churches like Bethel, which is interesting, the parallel to what happened in Bethel with the Northern Kingdom and the idolatry that occurred there.
If you want to read about false prophets, go read First Kings. There's so many false prophets. It's crazy. Like King Ahab, like every time he's like, all these 400 like prophets are telling him, yeah, it's okay, go do this. You're gonna fight this battle. You're gonna win. There's like one that's saying like, no, you're gonna die. They're like, I don't listen to him.
Throw him out.
Exactly.
Oh man, that's how it goes. That's how false prophecy goes. It's real popular. All right, so let's go back to the bowls of wrath here. You see that chart there?
Yep.
So this chart, I kind of have it laid out there. I'll briefly go through them. The French Revolution and the Papal Leprosy. So I have a little date range here, and then I kind of put an asterisk next to like the primary marker, what I think it might have been, 1798. So the second bowl being the naval devastations of the French Revolutionary Wars and Napoleonic Wars. Land warfare of the French Revolutionary Wars and Napoleonic Wars. 4 is the rise of Emperor Napoleon and dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire. And 5 is capture of Rome and the Papal States.
Did we settle on a date for when the tribulation ended?
The Great Tribulation?
Yeah.
I think the Great Tribulation doesn't end until Yeshua returns.
What about like that 1260 years?
Okay, so that one...
What do we call that?
Yes.
What are we labeling that?
That one I call... what's the actual biblical term for it? Basically, that's the amount of time that the man of lawlessness has authority to act, to prevail in warfare over the saints. That's how it's described. The man of the lawless has authority to act and to prevail in warfare over the saints. So it doesn't mean that the man of lawlessness is killed, that all his power or influence is stripped away at the end of the 1260. It means he no longer has authority to act and to prevail in warfare over the saints. We can fight back. We can survive. We can live. We can begin to grow this kingdom and the truth. And we start to see the tide shift, I believe. I'm not all doom and gloom up until Yeshua returns, but I also don't believe we're going to take the kingdom on our own. That doesn't happen till he comes back. Like post-millennialists kind of believe that most of the world is going to be evangelized before Yeshua's return. And I don't see that happening. I see a great revival of the Jewish people occurring when he returns. But so
like that futurism. It's like it's going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. All this stuff's happening like pretty fast, pretty quick.
A premillennialist futurist would say it's going to get worse and worse and worse, and all this is going to happen in the last like 7 years. A postmillennialist preterist would say that we are experiencing the millennial kingdom right now, and it will basically climax in Yeshua returning as we continue to evangelize and make the world better and better and better. And then amillennialists, they believe that we're living in the millennium, but that it's not necessarily getting better and better and better. And then there are some that are a little bit more optimistic, like optimistic millennialists, who think that things are maybe going to get better, but we're not going to evangelize the majority of the earth, right? So there's these different perspectives where people fall on their eschatology. So I would definitely fall in the premillennial camp because I don't believe the millennium has begun. So you asked about the 1,260 years, when do they end? I believe 1797
Okay.
was the last year of that. So it ended in 1797. So 1798 is the cutoff date. That's when the bowls start.
Gotcha.
So let's see if we can. Do you want to back some of this up with scripture? See if it fits or not.
That sounds fun. Let's do it.
All right. So we're gonna have to flip over to Revelation 15. It's going to introduce the bowls. So here in verse 5, remember how we saw in Revelation 11, the seventh trumpet, heaven was opened, the ark of God, and then lightning and stuff? Well, now we see in verse 5 here, after this I looked in the temple, the tabernacle of testimony was opened in heaven. So here's a hyperlink back to Revelation 11. Kind of like, all right, we're picking up where we left off there. And out of the temple came 7 angels with the 7 plagues, 7 bowls of wrath, right? So verse 7, one of the 4 living creatures gave the 7 angels 7 bowls full of the wrath of God, who lives forever and ever. The temple is filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power. No one could enter the temple until the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were completed. So basically this hyperlink tells us that after the 6th trumpet, when we hit the 7th trumpet, this is where we pick off. So after the 2 witnesses have finished their time, this is where we pick up. After 1,260 years is up, 1798, this is where we pick up with the bowls of wrath. So we can go to the next chapter and actually see the description. So the first one is described, it says, verse 1, Then I heard a loud voice from the temple saying to the 7 angels, Go, pour out on the earth the 7 bowls of God's wrath. So the first angel went out and poured out his bowl on the earth, and loathsome malignant sores broke out on those who had the mark of the beast and worshipped its image. All right, so if you go back and you think plagues of Egypt, or if you think Old Testament, and you see loathsome malignant sores, what comes to your mind?
Does sound like some plagues of Egypt for sure.
Mm-hmm. When I read malignant, I read, okay, this is spreading, right? It's metastasizes. It's not a benign tumor. This is something that will kill you. It will lead to your death. So it's literally these sores are gonna start rotting you away. They're loathsome. So I view it as a leprous type of plague. Something that spreads, something that eats away at your life until you are no more. So, and it breaks out on those who had the mark of the beast and worshipped its image. And we've identified, did we talk about 666? We covered that?
I don't believe so.
Oh man, we got to do that. All right, we'll do that sometime. But basically, the 666 is a direct reference to the papacy. And there's a process called isosephy. It's the Greek form of gematria. It was used all the time in the 1st and 2nd century, and where you would spell out a name with numbers. And so 666 in Greek isosephy, it matches the phrase Roman, or the word is actually Latinos, which means Roman man. And so it's talking about the Roman man, which is the Pope. And in Hebrew, it actually does the same too, but it says Romit. So that's interesting. But the point is that this is directed, it's poured out on the entire earth, or the region that we've been discussing, so the known world, and it's poured out on specifically the beast kingdom, right? Not believers, but the beast kingdom. So then let's go back and see if I can pull up my Word document here. Hang on. So that would be this French Revolution and papal leprosy.
Papal leprosy. Some necrotizing fasciitis.
Yes. So here we go with the boils of Egypt in Deuteronomy 28:27, with tumors and scabs and itch from which you cannot be cured. So I believe that these sores are incurable flesh-eating, similar to leprosy, indicating, and this is all symbolic of this beast that's being afflicted with this, right? So the beast will suffer decay until its death. So what type of disease would ultimately destroy a world system ideology or a world system? Well, the ideologies of people, because people are what constitute a world system. So as a world system begins to decay from within, it means that the philosophies and ideologies of people are beginning to turn against this kingdom and cast it off, and so that it begins to decay and die. And so what happened was the French Third Estate was basically the middle class of France, and so they were about 98% of the population. They adopted the title National Assembly, and they convened in an indoor tennis court, and they vowed to bring about constitutional reform. This was the whole philosophical underpinnings of this was from basically the Enlightenment, which came from the Renaissance, and that came during the time right after the Sixth Trumpet, this period of Renaissance and the Reformation. So all these ideas started to come out about rationalism. Can we rationalize what we believe? Do we believe something just because a king or a pope told us? Or do we believe that humans have free will, they have the ability to think for themselves, right? And so that leads to these civil rights movements declaring the natural, unalienable, and sacred rights of man, including liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression. Now, this is why the French were so in line with the American Revolution and sent us that big old Statue of Liberty, because what this was all about was liberty, right? So basically, this movement restricted the monarchy, promoted democracy and freedom of speech. It asserted popular sovereignty as opposed to the divine rights of kings, and the special rights of the nobility and clergy were stripped. All right. Now, and then it says, no one may be disturbed on account of his opinions, even religious ones, as long as the manifestation of such opinions does not interfere with the established law and order. So basically, freedom of religion. We value this in America today. So we'll move down and kind of skip over some of the details here. So, yes, the French Roman Catholic Church is known as the Gallican Church. It came under state control with the civil constitution of the clergy in 1790. So now they took control over the Catholic Church in France, and its power was stripped in all spheres. And then this de-Christianization took place, leading to basically the outlaw of Christianity, and then these cults began to rise up. The first cult was the cult of reason, and then came the cult of the supreme being. They replaced the 7-day week with a 10-day week, with 12 30-day months per year, and 5 or 6 intercalary days to round out the solar year. That didn't last very long, though. The cult of reason was established in 1793. It was an atheistic religion sponsored by the state, and they celebrated the Festival of Reason. Churches were confiscated and transformed into temples of reason. King Louis and Queen Marie were executed by guillotine. A new government was formed. Revolutionary ideas spread to Belgium, Netherlands, and Italy. And then the Committee of Public Safety was formed in France, which is interesting because this had nothing to do with public safety. They began basically rounding up conspirators or people that they suspected that were supportive of the monarchy, and began cutting their heads off and shooting them and all sorts of things. So this is what was known as the Reign of Terror. And so Robespierre, Maximilien Robespierre, was the major leader of this movement, and they carried out waves of mass executions. So here's a little snippet. About 300,000 suspects were arrested, 17,000 executed, about 10,000 died in prison or without trial. So he hated the cult of reason, And then he established his own deistic religion for the Republic named the Cult of the Supreme Being. And it became the state religion of France in 1794. And so, but he rejected Muhammad, he rejected Jesus, he rejected the God of the Jews, and so, but he was worshiping this idea of basically humanism, yeah, so he got his head cut off because people didn't like him. Eventually,
Everybody's getting their head cut off.
everybody gets their head cut off in the French Revolution.
So America is just getting its start, right? Were we involved in this cult of reason, or did we have what kind of
No.
control did the papacy have on the colonies?
Well, I mean, you look at the Pilgrims, and
Mostly
a lot of them
Reformation.
were leaving.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were leaving England, and they wanted their own religious freedom as well from the monarchy there. And so you had Puritans and different groups of believers, and you had atheists and you had deists there as well.
It's got me thinking, like, with France sending us the Statue of Liberty, I'm like, what was going on? Were we part of this whole...
Yeah, I forget
I'm
what
sure there
year they
were.
sent that. I forget what year it was. But I don't know that there's a direct link other than like a philosophical movement that spread throughout the world during this time. In fact, the fact that America grew during time is more a testament to the fact that these ideas were spreading worldwide, right? The idea of revolution and human rights and civil rights.
They helped us in the Revolutionary War, France.
Right. With the French helped us, yeah. And that comes into these revolutionary wars here in France. So that's where Napoleon Bonaparte rose through the ranks and became a general, and then was very successful. So, with France's military success and occupation of foreign lands, revolutionary ideas spread throughout all of Europe, metastasizing like an infectious disease of the psyche. The papacy consistently supported opponents of the French during this time. So here's the first Bull of Wrath, I believe. The Directory of France determined to abolish the papacy, and in February of 1798, Napoleonic troops captured Rome under General Berthier, declared Rome a republic, and demanded the Pope renounce his temporal power. When he refused, he was taken prisoner and exiled from the Vatican, and he died the next year, having reigned longer than any other pope. Right, so
But he
now
wasn't
you
beheaded.
have this. Go ahead.
But he wasn't
Yeah, he was
beheaded. So I was waiting for it. I'm like, oh,
All right,
no guillotine.
no guillotine. Although the Pope he did have the crown stripped from him eventually, but I'm going to call that a head. So then basically Napoleon became a dictator. He became France's first consul, and then became emperor of France. So, this is kind of important here to kind of show the connection to the Holy Roman Empire. So Francis II had held the title of Holy Roman Emperor since 1792, and so he proclaimed himself to be Emperor of Austria. He was in like response to Napoleon becoming emperor. He was like, well, I'm Emperor of Austria. And so then when he was defeated at Austerlitz, the German vassals formed a French satellite known as the Confederation of the Rhine. Francis abdicated the throne and at the same time dissolved the Holy Roman Empire. This was because he was emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, he knew that Napoleon would claim it and take over, so he dissolved it completely so that Napoleon couldn't do that. So this is the in August of 1806, the formal end of the Holy Roman Empire, which I believe is the Fourth Bowl of Wrath. Okay? In between the first and the fourth are the naval and land battles of the French Revolutionary War and the Napoleonic Wars. So this gives you a little overview from start to finish of the first through fourth through these wars. So you can see, here's the Holy Roman Empire in 1789.
So that's the beast that,
The bees.
was wounded
Yeah, I
and
mean-
resurrected, right?
Right.
Received the mortal
Yep.
head wound, but came back.
Mm-hmm. And then you get the First French Empire in 1812. So you can see where the First French Empire took over virtually all the lands that were held by the Holy Roman Empire, and how important France was to this whole deal. 1/10 of the city fell in an earthquake. So if you view the city as Babylon, spiritual Babylon, right? The beast. 1/10 of it fell away. Well, France was the most powerful of the 10 kingdoms. So a huge earthquake, a huge political shift occurred during the French Revolution, leading to this.
I know
So-
Napoleon was stopped, like in Russia, just like Hitler was. Was like the Russian Orthodox Church a thing this time, or were they part of this Holy Roman Empire?
I mean, they existed, but I don't know. No, they wouldn't have been a part of that.
Okay.
It's a good question. I never actually thought about that side of things from that angle.
I guess like how is the Orthodox Church related? It's not part of it. But
Right. I mean, they're technically a schism, and they don't submit to the Pope. But that, that doesn't necessarily make them right or any better. Just like just being a Protestant doesn't make you right or better. You know what I'm saying?
got to be a Pharisee.
Yes, have to be a Pharisee. We've got, yeah, I don't need to preach on it, but we're just as messed up in so many ways in Protestantism. So, I guess we could highlight a few of the things because, Revelation, you go back and we see the second angel poured out his bowl on the sea, and it turned to blood like that of the dead, and every living thing in the sea died. Well, if we go back and you remember the fifth trumpet, Attila the Hun.
It's my favorite.
I'm sorry, not the fifth trumpet.
Oh.
Sorry, that's land warfare.
Attila was like the
one
third,
that was the
maybe fourth.
sea was the
Vandals was the sea.
Yes.
Odoacer.
Third, I think it was the third. I don't remember. I have it in here somewhere. Here we go. The second trumpet contains similar language to the second bowl. In the second trumpet, the Roman navy suffered tremendous defeat at the hands of the Vandals
Genseric.
under
not
Genseric
Odoacer. Gotcha.
and the western portions of the Mediterranean Sea. In like manner, the second bowl pertains to the major naval battles of the French Revolutionary Wars and Napoleonic Wars, which included the massive French, Spanish, and British navies. So a big difference is in the second trumpet, it says 1/3 of the sea turned to blood and 1/3 of the living creatures died. And we saw where those battles took place. Not quite the entire Mediterranean, maybe a third or up to half of it. But what we see in the bowl, it says all of the sea turned to blood and all the living creatures died. What's interesting is like futurists who try to make all the bowls, trumpets, and everything happen in the 7-year period, like you've got in one month, it's like, oh, okay, so a third of the sea and all the creatures died, and then like a third of the earth is destroyed with whatever, and giant earthquakes, and then you have all of the seas. Like, how many major catastrophes have to take place if you're viewing it from a futurist perspective before the world just blows up? Like, how do like, if you're viewing these things on that scale, do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, and like I was talking to my wife about it. She's like, "Well, how does Revelation doesn't talk about like the world getting back? How does it recover?" I'm like, "Well, because it's happening. All these disasters are scattered and happening. They're not all happening at once, like you've been taught. So it's like there's time for the world to
Right.
recover."
And they're not hyper literal like we've been taught. Like when we read all of the creatures in the sea, and we think, well, every body of water on earth is turned to blood. How many times does that have to happen before it means something? Or is it talking about something that we should see in history, that we should relate to in history, to see the clues, to see the footprints, right, of prophecy taking place? That's how I view it. So if this is the case, if this is true, that should reflect something that we saw in the second trumpet, then we should see a similarity, except it should be on a much bigger scale.
And we're
It
still
should
talking
encompass-
the Roman Empire, so it'd be Mediterranean Sea, right?
Yeah, perhaps even bigger than that. Because, I mean, if you think about the Roman Empire, the Mediterranean Sea is the sea, right? The sea that's right in the middle of everything. But, I mean, there's a few other seas around, and there's the oceans where they would, travel and navigate and do some things. So we should at least expect that it's, 3 times as big as it was before, as far as naval battles go, right? Naval warfare, so to say. So what we're going to see is that is what happened. So the French wanted to capture Egypt to force Britain to make peace, so they started the Mediterranean campaign of 1798, climaxed at the Battle of Nile in 1798, just north of Alexandria, Egypt. The French navy was defeated, but Napoleon was able to make land and invade Egypt. Several nations joined Britain, started the War of the Second Coalition, and began naval operations all over the Mediterranean, including the Adriatic, Malta, and Balearic Sea. Then this Treaty of Amiens in 1802 ended the Revolutionary Wars, and they had peace for a short period of time. And they picked right back up in 1803 in the Napoleonic Wars and the War of the Third Coalition. During this time, France dominated Europe. So Britain decided, okay, we're going to declare war on France again, and they enforced a naval blockade of France. And so Russia and Austria created a third coalition to defeat Napoleon, and Napoleon wanted to invade Britain because he knew if he could take Britain, they could ensure his success. And this culminated in the Battle of Trafalgar, and it's considered by many to be the greatest naval battle in military history. It took place in the Atlantic Ocean, just off the southwest coast of Spain. And so the French were allied with the Spanish, but were defeated by the British, and solidified British naval superiority for over a century. So Napoleon turned his attention elsewhere. He was really good on land. Sea didn't go as well for him.
Some of this is sounding familiar only because I've watched the British miniseries with Sean Bean called there are a bunch of books by Bernard Cromwell, but there's like Sharp's Rifle, and it was all Napoleonic War stuff, so some of this is rigged. But of course it's very British focus. The French are bad, Napoleon's bad.
Yes.
Of course he is bad, but it's like this is giving me a whole different perspective here.
Right.
Different take on this.
Yeah. I see Napoleon as an evil man, but an instrument in the hands of God for a particular purpose. So here's a cool painting of the Battle of Trafalgar.
He's a servant of change, or some
Yes.
agent of chaos. I don't know.
And you have other naval battles during these wars, including the West India Islands in the Caribbean Sea, the Cape of Good Hope off the coast of South Africa, and in the North Sea. So the naval warfare of the Second Bowl extended well beyond the description of the Second Trumpet, which limited it to a third of the sea, and this fulfilled its description pertaining to all of the sea. So it encompassed the entire naval area of the lands of the former Roman Empire, so to say, of this beast. Barnes summarizes it well. He's quoting E.B. Elliott. We should expect to find the fulfillment in some calamity that would fall on the marine force or the commerce of the power that is here referred to, that is, according to the interpretation all along adopted, of the papal power. And the proper application, according to this interpretation, would be the complete destruction or annihilation of the naval force that contributed to sustain the papacy. So the French fleets actually sustained the papacy. And so he says this we should look for in respect to the naval power of France, Spain, and Portugal, for these are the only papal nations that have had a navy. We should expect, in the fulfillment of this, to find a series of naval disasters reddening the sea with blood, which would tend to weaken the power of the papacy, and which might be regarded as one in the series of events that would ultimately result in its entire overthrow. Let's see. There was a series of naval disasters that swept away the fleets of France and completely demolished the most formidable naval power that had ever been prepared by any nation under the papal dominion. Eliot writes, the great naval war between France and England was in progress, which from its commencement in 1793 lasted for above 20 years, with no intermission but that of the short and delusive peace of Amiens. Let's see, he goes on.
You've been hard at work here,
Yeah.
Daniel. This is a lot.
Yes, it is a lot. I won't read it all, but he lists all these areas: Holland, Spain, Corsica, West India Islands, Cape of Good Hope, and he summarizes. He says it appears that there were destroyed near 200 ships of the line, between 300 and 400 frigates, and an almost incalculable number of smaller vessels of war, ships of commerce. The whole history of the world does not present such a period of naval war, destruction, and bloodshed. So there you have the naval warfare of the French Great War. And
that was which bowl?
the Second Bowl.
Second bowl, like the Second Trumpet with the Vandals. And Genseric. It's cool.
Right. You want me to cover the Third Bowl?
Yeah, let's do it. Any other connections there on the Second Bowl, Second Trumpet?
No. There's a little.
They both were bad for Rome, right? Both were destructive.
No, and right. I mean, if you read the bowl, all we're told is it's poured out into the sea and it turned to blood. Everything in the sea died. So we're not given a lot of detail, but we go back and we interpret this the same way that we interpreted the trumpets, and we should look for a naval battle that would be on a larger scale, encompassing all of the sea. And that's what we see. So then when we get to the Third Bowl, it says, into the rivers and springs of water, and they turn to blood. He says, righteous are you, Holy One, who was and is, because you have wrought these judgments. For they have spilled the blood of saints and prophets, and you have given them blood to drink as they deserve. Remember, we go back to that, I think it was the third trumpet, where it's poured out on the rivers and springs of water, and they drank the bitter water, wormwood, and here you have given them blood to drink. So again, we you should expect to see the similar occurrence as we saw there. So let me pull this back up. And we see the third trumpet, Attila the Hun, launched his Danube offensive on the Eastern Roman Empire.
I was going to say these
in
sound very
441.
familiar. Again, it's
Mhm.
like mirror images.
Pretty much.
It's almost like John knew what he was doing.
Almost. So he went from the east in the Balkans, Eastern Roman Empire, and then through the Po River Valley. And so both Attila and Napoleon engaged in major battles along the Po River basin. So he had this first in the French Great War. He had the Army of the Rhine along the Rhine River. The Italian campaign. So Napoleon's first campaign was in Italy, and he defeats an Austrian Piedmontese army, defeats the Sardinians, drove the Austrians out of Lombardy and took control of Milan, and then went south and took the Papal States, drove the Austrians out of Italy. And so then he did his Egyptian campaign and went down. You can see the pyramids there in this painting here. The Battle of the Pyramids, where he invaded Egypt and Syria and fought near the mouth of the Nile River there.
What was he trying to accomplish in Egypt?
Well, he was trying to defeat the British Navy and then get on land.
Get control of all the Egyptian ports and everything.
Yeah.
The trade routes.
The Egyptians and the Ottomans. Yeah. I can't explain all the military strategy of why, but
well, actually, I remember you shared a couple podcasts back, like how like a lot of people, I think it was like Isaac Newton or whatever, had his own theories on like the 10 kingdoms or the 10 horns. And you think like Napoleon, a really smart guy. Do you think he had any awareness of what he was doing based on revelation here? And
I don't know.
Somebody asked me the
think
same
so,
question, like, well, this is a fun, interesting new theory. I'm like, well, it was not really like new. Like, a lot of people have had these theories.
Right.
Like, even at this time you're talking about, during the Napoleonic Wars, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Somebody's like reading their Bible, like, oh, yeah,
That's true.
This is like unfolding.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that what we tend to do is, yeah, or at least me, like, see everything as, well, this is the final battle. This is the end of Revelation. My time is the end. You know what I mean? So people might have thought this was the final, like this was Armageddon. This was, and Napoleon was the Antichrist. And then when, the Nazis in World War II, people thought that was, Armageddon, which it might have been. But, and we all tend to think that our day is the end, the last major thing. So I don't know. I do know that there were historicists who correctly predicted the fall of the Ottoman Empire,
Right.
long before it happened. So I'm sure there were people that were aware of it. I kind of doubt Napoleon was. Then he crossed the Alps again and engaged in warfare along the Po River Valley against the Austrians. Then the Battle of Austerlitz in modern-day Czech Republic. And this is where he established the Confederation of the Rhineland and dissolved the Holy Roman Empire. So I think that's kind of like the definitive marker. When you have this huge, major, probably his best battle ever, and leads to the dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire, that kind of sets the deal, for me, that this really marks this third bowl of wrath, because it's poured out on the beast and its kingdom. It's losing its power more and more and more. And then he had the Peninsular War, and then the Russian campaign, where he came to his ultimately to his demise. So what I did was I actually made a
Same
map.
with Hitler too. Anyone that tries to crush Russia seems to be their demise. Like if they just focused elsewhere.
See if I can.
So I was asking about Russia before.
There we go. Yeah. Here we go. So I put here all these battles, or these major wars, actually. It took me a while to figure out. You should be impressed.
I am.
I'm just kidding. So first coalition, boom, we start there. Second coalition, all the way down to here. And then, yeah, we can kind of follow the steps here. So these are all these major battles. And then we compare that with the Huns. So if you go to this green line, you kind of see what the Huns did all through here and through here. Now, the Huns obviously didn't come down through this area and up through the Holy Land, okay? But they fought along the rivers and the streams. And then if you look at where Napoleon, he was right here in the rivers and streams, especially in the Po River Valley. And the Huns came right through here in the Balkans. But this area was controlled by the Ottomans during Napoleon's time, who controlled this area. So Napoleon did assault the Ottomans and their position as well. And so his was a little bit more expansive and global than the Huns. But it was referring to these land battles. And there you have it. So then we leave off with the fourth bowl. Pretty cool stuff.
You think God allows people like Napoleon's to keep this system from causing too much oppression and deception? It seemed like
Yeah,
it allowed,
I think-
without Napoleon, probably we wouldn't have won the Revolutionary War, right? Britain was kind of distracted.
That's true. Well, I mean, when did we won that in
1776.
1776?
We didn't
So
win
this
it.
is a good-
We declared independence in 1776. I don't think we won the war
That's
until
true.
another 10 years.
Right. So, if the French Revolution began in 1798, this would have been a little while after that. But then you have,
It was only 6
what
years,
was the
actually.
next war? Was that the War of 1812 that came after that?
You're the history
Military
man
conflict
now.
between U.S. and Great Britain.
I just watch movies.
So I'm pretty sure that everything that Britain had to go through with the French probably didn't help them when 1812 came along and we were much better established, so to say. Yeah, so we covered the fourth bowl pretty much with, Napoleon leading to the dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire. But remember, the fourth trumpet, so the fourth bowl says the sun was on the sun. It was poured out on the sun. And it was given power to scorch with fire. And the people were scorched by intense heat, and they cursed the name of God who had authority over these plagues, yet they did not repent and give him glory. Compare this with the trumpet, and its effect was on a third of the heavenly luminaries. All right? And the third trumpet We need to read that because it's or the fourth trumpet. Where is the fourth trumpet? Revelation 9?
Yeah, that was the Hiruli or
So
whatever.
fourth.
The
Oh.
name I can't say. And the Hiruli.
Yeah.
The Odoacer dude.
So check this out. Verse 12, Revelation 8:12. The fourth angel sounded his trumpet, and a third of the sun and moon and stars were struck. A third of the stars were darkened, a third of the day was without light, and a third of the night as well. So when this happened, we interpreted this as the Hiruli and King Odoacer taking down the leaders and dignitaries and governmental authorities and figures of the Roman Empire and taking over, leading to the dissolution of the Roman Empire and its breaking up into the divisions. And so this pouring out on the sun, the third of the sun, moon, and stars, caused them to be darkened. And a third of the day was without light, and a third of the night as well. So it actually dimmed. But what does this bowl do? The bowl has the opposite effect. It says it was poured out on the sun and it was given power to scorch. So it increased the intensity of the sun. If we view the sun as the primary leader or dictator or emperor of the nation, all of a sudden he's given this immense power. Well, when Napoleon became the emperor, he was intensified by this bowl and was given the ability to scorch people, to defeat them, to basically trample upon these nations and be so successful. And they cursed the name of God, but they didn't repent and give him glory. So it's kind of an opposite effect in this one, the way that it's worded.
I see that.
So this trumpet, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I see that.
Yeah. So that caused the end of the Western Roman Empire in the fourth trumpet, beginning of Middle Ages.
And the
Let's
fourth
see.
bowl as well, kind of being the end of the Holy Roman Empire.
Yes, it ended the Holy Roman Empire.
Does Revelation talk
So-
about like Waterloo and like Napoleon's exile and then coming back and all that?
No, it
It's
doesn't go
I guess
into.
it's not that important.
Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't have that level of detail. It would be cool if it did, at least not that I'm aware of. I'm skipping over some of the history that we already covered here. About 4 to 7 million people died due to the Great French War. Thus, the people of Europe were scorched with the fires of war. This was pretty big for that time. Although the first bull marked the end of the 1,260 years of papal Antichrist prevailing in warfare against the saints, it did not signify the total eradication of Mystery Babylon. As indicated in the 5th, 6th, and 7th bowls of wrath, there awaits further punishment to be poured out upon the throne of the beast in Mystery Babylon. So we don't expect the first 4 bowls to completely destroy and eliminate Roman Catholicism. But we see it beginning to sequentially dismantle to the point where it no longer has military power, and this really comes to a head here in the 5th bowl. Yeah, so what happened is the war continued on for some time. This 5th bowl says, he poured out on the throne of the beast, and its kingdom was plunged into darkness. Men began to gnaw their tongues in anguish and curse the God of heaven for their pains and sores, yet they did not repent of their deeds. So it goes to its seat of authority, and we know the seat of authority is the papacy, which is the 8th form of the Roman government, or 8th head, so to say. So it's directed at the papal throne and resulted in the permanent annihilation of the papal states and the Pope's temporal power. So Napoleon eventually lost at the Battle of Waterloo. He abdicated for the second time. The Congress of Vienna restored independent governments throughout Italy, largely controlled by the Austrian Empire. And Congress restored the Pope's temporal power in the Papal States. So he had the Papal States, but his influence and power was still severely diminished. So now you have this system of absolute monarchy beginning to crumble, and all these patriotic movements rising up even throughout Italy, which led to a social movement known as the Resurgence, or reunification of Italy. I'm not even going to try to say this word because I'll mess it up.
Sounds like an Italian dish.
Yes, it's probably a tasty Italian dish.
Sigilmento.
Yes, it's good with
Parmesan
Alfredo.
cheese.
Yes.
Hopefully you don't resurge it. Throw it up.
Just ask Mario.
So resurgence of like,
rebellion.
were they talking about like the Napoleonic Empire? Or it's like the
Oh,
thought
so
of the reason,
the
cult
resurgence
of reason?
was a movement in Italy to basically, it was revolutions leading up to the people of Italy wanting to have their own state, not be ruled by monarchies. So here's a description from Wikipedia. The revolutions of 1848, known as the Springtime of the Peoples or Springtime of Nations, were a series of revolutions throughout Europe over the course of more than 1 year. It remains the most widespread revolutionary wave in European history to date. They were essentially democratic and liberal, aiming to remove monarchical structures, creating independent nation states. They spread across Europe after they began in Italy in 1848. Over 50 countries were affected, but with no significant coordination or cooperation among their respective revolutionaries. So they were led by coalitions of workers and reformers from both the middle and upper class. Let's see, significant lasting reforms included the abolition of serfdom in Austria and Hungary, the end of absolute monarchy in Denmark, and the introduction of representative democracy in the Netherlands. The revolution was most important in France, Netherlands, Italy, Austrian Empire, and the states of the German Confederation that would make up the German Empire in the late 19th and 20th centuries. So, you have this resurgence in Italy. The people are wanting change. So now you have
And a lot of these people
Roman
were like the Waldenses, who had crusades against them for centuries, essentially.
Right.
Tired of
So
the
now
popes.
the Pope's like, we got to do something about this. People are rising up, right? So they convened the First Ecumenical Council in June of 1868, which was the first ecumenical council in over 3 centuries since the Council of Trent. The Council of Trent was the anti-Protestant movement, and they're like, we're going to fight against Protestantism. So 3 centuries later, they have this council in response to the encroachment of the Kingdom of Italy upon the Papal States. So they discussed what they would do, and they made several decisions, and one of the most important ones was papal infallibility. This is where they created the dogma of papal infallibility.
Well, the Pope can't be
And
wrong.
so, right. Well, so it gave him more ecclesiastical power. They were losing temporal power, so he gave himself more ecclesiastical power to say that he could speak on God's behalf, right? So he was, in a sense, cursing the God of heaven for his pains and sores, those philosophies so destructive to papal power, and claimed for himself the right to speak infallibly as God on earth insofar as it pertains to important matters of the Church. So here is, from the Vatican, a description here of them unanimously adopting the dogmatic constitution on the Catholic faith. Let's see. Yeah, there were people that boycotted and didn't like it, but let's see. During this period, the Franco-Prussian War broke out. Emperor Napoleon III was captured, and France was no longer in a position to protect the rule of Pope in Rome. And in September 1870, the Kingdom of Italy captured and occupied Rome. On the 20th of October, the Vatican Council I was indefinitely suspended by Pope Pius. So here's what happened. This papal infallibility dogma says that when the Pope speaks from his chair or from his throne, right? Because remember, this bowl was poured out on the throne of the beast. So ex cathedra means from the throne. So when he speaks ex cathedra from the chair of St. Peter in matters relating to morals or faith, he's protected and guided by the Holy Spirit and thus unable to err. He claims to speak directly on behalf of God when he speaks from the throne of St. Peter, yet it was this very throne that God came to pour out judgment upon in the fifth bowl, a throne which is to be cast into darkness. On March 16th, 1871, the Kingdom of Italy was proclaimed by the Parliament of the Kingdom of Sardinia, with Victor Emmanuel II taking the title King of Italy. September 20th, 1870, the Royal Italian army captured Rome and the Papal States. The Papal forces were escorted to St. Peter's Square, and the Papal army was disbanded. He was allowed to maintain some of the Palatine Guard. So I believe that the capture of Rome and the Papal States in 1870 is the definitive marker of the Fifth Bowl of Wrath, especially because of what happens right after this. The Papal States and the temporal power of the Holy See ceased to exist, and its territories were annexed to the Kingdom of Italy. And the unification of Italy was complete when Rome was made the capital of Italy on February 3rd, 1871. So Rome was incorporated into the kingdom. Pope Pius denounced this action and excommunicated the invaders, including King Victor Emmanuel, and with an encyclical. And now the Pope was promised sovereignty over Leonine City, which is basically Vatican City, and granted special privileges by the law of guarantees, which would include a grant from the government, dependence on foreign affairs, self-governments, limited or no taxes, and free use of Italian railway, postal, and telegraph systems. But what did he do? Did he accept that and say, okay, we'll just continue doing our peaceful religion and just teach people about God and just be a separate, separate from church and state? No. He and the popes after him refused. Rather, they gnawed their tongues in anguish and refused to repent of their deeds. Pius indignantly refused to accept the terms of the subalpine government, as he termed the House of Savoy, whom he regarded as the spoiler of God's vicar. Parliament regularly voted the annuity from 1871 onward, but the popes never accepted it, as to do so would be to recognize the Kingdom of Italy as a legitimate government. So from 1871 to 1921, none of the popes were willing to. Pius shut himself in his tiny domain and refused to leave it, regarding himself as the prisoner of the Vatican. His successors to 1929 followed the policy and never set foot outside the Vatican once they were elected pope. This became known as the Roman question. What are we going to do about the Roman? And so they would not leave.
So right now,
they wouldn't appear.
It's just confined to this Vatican City, really. It's like its own little country.
Yes, it is its own country.
Right now, to this day, it's still same thing.
It is. Now, they refused to come out until 1929, from 1871 to 1929. So they wouldn't appear at St. Peter's Square or the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica. All the papal addresses were given from a balcony facing an internal courtyard, and papal coronations were held in the Sistine Chapel. And the popes refused to expose themselves publicly to the light of day, thereby casting themselves and their kingdom into darkness for 59 years due to their refusal to repent. So the throne of the beast was cast into darkness from 1871 to 1929. And the Seattle Times wrote an article about David Kirch's book, Prisoner in the Vatican. I'll skip that, but it just kind of goes into a little bit more of the politics around that. So what brought them out of this period of darkness, what caused them to say, all right, we'll step out into the light of day again. The Lateran Treaty of 1929. So this was an agreement between the Kingdom of Italy under Victor Emmanuel and Benito Mussolini's Italian fascist government and the Holy See, making Vatican City an independent state under the jurisdiction of the Holy See and giving it financial reparations for the loss of the Papal States. As a condition of the treaty, the Pope pledged to remain neutral in international affairs. So we'll leave it there. We'll leave there at the Pope being thrown cast into darkness, and the rise of Mussolini and the Lateran Treaty, which sets things up for World War I and II.
I'm guessing those show up in Revelation.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yes, they do. Now, I'm still trying to figure out those, though.
Oh.
Because there are some historicists who believe...
You got 1 week. Just figure it out, man.
1 week to figure it out. They believe that World War II was...
1929 would be in between the two. This Lateran Treaty.
That's right. Thank you. Yeah. So, what was World War I? Was that 19?
You have it right there. It's on your. Just go down a little bit.
Oh, I do.
There you go.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Yeah. 1914, 1918, 1939. So, yes. So here, the sixth angel, the Euphrates River. I won't give it all away, but there are historicists who think that the World War I was the War of Armageddon. Because what's interesting is there's actually no such thing as the War of Armageddon.
What? Who was assassinated that started World War I? Wasn't it like a pope-like figure? It wasn't a pope. But
don't ask me questions
Bishop.
Live. I can't give you. I'm not a real historian. I don't know. I don't remember.
Okay. Well, it's probably not important then. It was like an archbishop or a duke. Maybe it was a duke.
Yeah.
Maybe it was a duke. Yeah, never mind. It's probably not a papacy thing. Who? We just Google things here. Archduke.
Archduke. Okay. You're right.
That's an archduke. No, I was wrong. I thought
Franz Ferdinand of Austria. There we go. Thank you.
Sorry, it's even a band. Franz Ferdinand.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice. But yeah, see, it says in Hebrew place that kings are assembled in the place that is called Armageddon. So it doesn't say that there's this huge battle at Armageddon or a war at Armageddon. It says the kings assembled there. So what does that mean? So we got to figure that out. So, and then there is what was the guy, British officer at the Battle of Armageddon?
Oh, who said that all the worlds could be gathered here in Megiddo? I think that was Napoleon who said that, actually.
Oh, did he? Okay.
Well, probably a few people did, but I remember when he was like in Israel, looking at the Valley of Megiddo.
Allenby. Sorry.
What, Allenby?
Yeah. The climactic battle of the Sinai and Palestine campaign of the First World War was the Battle of Megiddo. But it didn't take place there. See, that's the thing, is that he was called... What was he called? Oh, yeah. Here we go. It's right here at the very beginning. Its name, which has been described as perhaps misleading, since very limited fighting took place near Tel Megiddo. Remember when you were there with me? That was fun.
I do.
It's a good picture. It was chosen by British commander Edmund Allenby for its biblical and symbolic resonance.
Oh, we chose it.
So, I mean, it's like, is this the sixth trumpet or the sixth bowl because we have a battle of Megiddo, or did General Allenby call it that because he thought it was so important? So should we ascribe prophetic significance to something because it was named after a Bible prophetic event? See, that's the question. Yeah. So we have to look at everything else before we just slap, you know.
In 1799, Napoleon Bonaparte fought the Ottoman Turks near Megiddo, and he called it the most natural battleground of the whole earth. So I was kind of right. He said, like, the whole world could fight here in this valley.
That's cool. Send me that.
I will send you that.
I need that. I need it.
I don't know if it's useful, but I remember, like, we were up on that hill looking at it, and someone mentioned it. I remember Allenby too. I definitely remember Napoleon being there as well.
That's interesting.
Let's send you a screenshot.
There's a lot there. And so, yeah, maybe we can cover some of that next time.
So we're going to do World War I, World War II next time. What bowls are those? So the fifth bowl was what? It was just kind of against the throne of the papacy.
Yes, the throne of the beast.
The beast. Seems like the beast is pretty beaten at this point.
Yeah, but there's more to be poured out yet. Which, yeah, it's like today you could ask, well, if the 1,260 years are over, then why? And if the Catholic, if the Pope is the Antichrist, then why is he still around? Why is Catholicism still a thing? I'm like, well,
it's like, why are we still here? What?
There's 7 whole bowls.
Just get Jesus to come back.
That.
What are we waiting on?
Yeah. Look at 7 whole bowls. Take some time to do their thing.
It's like with soup, it takes a while. A bowl.
Yes, yeah, good. The longer it sits, though, it gets a little cold. Kind of hard to finish the last few.
Especially a bone broth. You gotta do that overnight. It's a lot of simmering.
Yes, it's true.
Is it soup yet? No.
Thanks for letting me ramble.
That was good. You look tired.
So I've been going back working on chronology of Antiochus and the Hasmonean Wars, and then the chronology of the siege of Jerusalem in 70 CE with Cestius and Titus, and trying to figure out the timelines, Daniel, and if they fit or not. Because one thing causes a change in something else. It's like a soup of all these things mixed together. Alphabet soup, and I can't put the letters in the right places.
Just keep lining up your dominoes, and they keep falling down.
Yes,
but
it's funny.
I love that period, so yeah, we can go back there once you figure it out.
We don't have to. It's just something I'm working on right now because it's helping to inform my opinions about the bowls and such. But
we can always do
stuff, man.
Some Passover stuff because that's on the horizon.
Yes, I'm excited about that. I have a lot to share about that. It should be fun.
Seems like January's been the longest month in the world.
Yeah, it has been.
Good to be back.
Yes, sir. Another episode of Pharisee Heresy.
Let us go up to the mountain of the Lord. Grab the tassel of the Pharisee. On his way home to Zion, we came to hassle the papacy and the counterfeit kingdom. You say heresy, I stand where the water seas. Lux lust set in tenebrous, light shining in the darkness.
Jesus was a Pharisee, and that is no heresy.